All right. So I'm going to walk through the slides a little bit here, but this is, I know Bryce, you weren't here, but we were talking about psychology as a science. Okay. And we were looking at different ways. What we went over in class on Monday was just how to read through some of the scientific journals. As we want to do everything that we do in practice and application, we want to make sure that that it's replicable, that it's going to be valid, and that it's going to that we can really apply it to specific populations of people. Okay, and the only way we do that is by understanding what parameters we need to, by which we need to study these events, these phenomena. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through a couple. We're not going to do I'm going to be flipping through quite a bit of these slides. I'm just going to be hitting on some of the hot points here to help you understand this a little bit better. So one of the ways that we do that is think critically. Now, I think we talked about critical thinking last week, right? So what's critical thinking?
Like using your reason to like everything that you understand about a subject to come to like the most logical result that you can given your scenario.
Right. And but the big picture is we want to be able to qualify it with fact, right? Not opinion. So critically thinking is, if we hear something, we want to qualify that and say, where do we get that with our source? You know, what source provided that? I think I used the example that it's flooding down in Texas, right? I don't know if I use that for this class or not, but if I came in here and said, no, Texas got hit with some pretty bad floods, you might believe me, you might not, right? But I didn't qualify that with any specific source. So now if I told you I saw on CNN earlier, you know, we know CNN is a pretty reputable source. Now I've qualified that and have a little bit more evidence to back that up. And that's kind of what critically thinking is. Thinking critically is making sure that when we say something, we can back it up with either fact or something a little bit more solid than our opinion. Okay. So I know we talked a little bit about this when we looked at the peer or the professional journals. Is the hypothesis, right? The hypothesis is a statement of what we expect to find. Okay, when we develop our research, like if we're coming up with a research, we're going to consider the question. You know, what's the overarching problem? One of the examples I like to use is freshmen. There tends to be a higher rate of suicide and depression with freshmen than any other class of students. Okay, so that's first of all, it's a problem, right? We know that's a problem because suicide is the ultimate negative outcome. But why is that? So now we're starting to generate questions. Why is it that that population has a higher rate of suicide? Now we're starting to think. Okay, now we're going to go out and we're going to do a little bit of fact finding, kind of like what we did with the professional journals. We're going to see that freshmen endure isolation. We're going to see that a recent change of their environment is going to be problematic for them. That could lead to depression, which would explain why they have a higher rate of suicide. Okay, so now we have a hypothesis, and our hypothesis, simply stated, is college freshmen tend to have a higher rate of suicide due to isolation and change of environment. Okay, that's our hypothesis statement. Okay, so now we've got an idea. We're going to go out and we're going to try and figure out how we're going to collect data. We're going to look at our population. We're going to look at a way that a method that we can collect that data. Maybe it's a survey, maybe it's an interview, whatever that may be. And I'll kind of walk you through ways that we can collect data or observe here a little bit later in this lecture. So once we get the data, we're going to collect it. We're actually going to go out and get that data, and then we're going to report the results. Does this all look familiar, Matt? Because we saw that in the journal. So once we get the results, we're going to interpret those results. What did they mean? Was there a correlation? And then we're going to talk about how this is replicable. How can somebody else do that? Because in order for us to have good research, we got to be able to have somebody replicate it, or we have to be able to replicate it ourselves and get very similar results, okay, if not identical. So that's really the science behind it, is coming up with a hypothesis, developing your methods for collection, reporting the results of that collection, interpreting, and then making sure it's replicable. Okay. And this is kind of just a neat little slide to give you what we just talked about. Okay. So we can have one of two results. Either our hypothesis is supported or it's rejected. So what that means is that we either found what we were looking for or we didn't find what we were looking for. And if we didn't, that's okay. What we just proved is either no relationship exists, or our way of collecting it wasn't a valid way of finding what our hypothesis was. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Okay. Like, for example, if going back to my idea that freshman students, college students have a higher rate of suicide. Okay. That's my hypothesis. I go out and I ask 200 seniors about depression and anxiety. Is that going to help me? Probably not, right? So my method of collection wasn't really great. Now, if I went back and said, what was your anxiety and depression like when you were a freshman? Getting a little closer, but probably still going to be hard to find, because it's kind of hard for us to really recall those times, right? Especially when we're out of them. So all that's shown is that maybe interviewing seniors who were once freshmen is probably not a great idea, but it's still research. Okay, so that's those are the two outcomes you can have. Talked about replicability, making sure that anybody can obtain the same or very similar results from that. Okay. All right. So let's kind of just check to see how we're doing with this so far. So, which point in the research process do researchers consider results that match the prediction might be caused by another factor? Right. At which point in the research process do researchers consider results that match the prediction? All right. What do you think? Okay, at which point in the research process do researchers results that match the prediction? Yeah, I'm not even sure I understand this question. All right. Match the results prediction that might cause by another factor. Okay. Interpretation. Okay, so anyway, I don't think I covered interpretation, so not a big deal. All right. I'm going to flip through these a little bit. So parsimony. Yeah. All right. I actually might go into this. So ESP, you all know what ESP is, right? So parsimony is it's kind of like smoke and mirrors. Okay, it gives you the illusion that something exists, like a relationship exists, when it really doesn't. Okay, so one of the examples that your book uses is ESP. How many of you do you know what ESP is? Okay, so ESP is being able to get information from an outside source without using your senses. So not telepathy. Yeah, I guess telepathy. So like somebody is thinking something, and then all of a sudden you have that information about what they're thinking. So mind reading kind of stuff, you know. So anyway, a lot of this is just smoke and mirrors that we know of. Okay, now I'm not discounting the possibility that something might exist. I'm just saying we don't have any scientific evidence of that. Okay, so but the people that do try to show that it exists, generally they're not using a scientific way of doing it. It could be explained by like they use professional psychics. You know, they might be a little bit vague. They might be talking to you in a way. They might be able to read your body language in a way that makes it seem like they know you, or they know what your thoughts are. They know what your past life is, or whatever. Okay, so anyway, so sorry about that. I don't know how to stop that from happening. All right. So anyway, in order to really qualify ESP as a valid thing, as a valid process in science, we would need to be able to conduct experiments on it. And people have tried to do experiments, and they reported the results as being valid and showing that it might exist. But the problem is replicability. They're not able to replicate it so that it happens time after time after time. Okay. So again, I'm not professing in either way that it exists or it doesn't exist. I'm just saying we don't have any scientific basis to say that it is an actual thing. And we can probably say that about a lot of things, right? We can say that about religion. We can say that about emotions, anything really. All right. And I'm curious. I mean, do either of you two believe in ESP? Okay. And it's kind of a philosophical approach to it, right? And again, it's like religion. Either you believe it exists or you don't believe it exists, or it's some variation in there. Maybe you have ideas that maybe we have powers that we haven't really tapped yet. By the way, fun little fact. So have you heard how much percentage of our brain do we use? Have you heard?
It's like up to 20%.
Okay, up to 20%. Have you heard that? We only use like 10% of our brain. Okay, fun little fact with that. I always like to kind of dispel that. We actually use all of our brain. Where that came from, I think that where that came from is I teach biopsychology, and we're born with like 200 billion neurons in our brain, and those are the building blocks that form neural pathways and memories and functioning, motor functioning. By the time we die, we only have about 20 billion. So I think that's where that came from, is we only use 10% of our brain. All the other neurons that we don't use kind of just prune and flush out of our body. We never actually develop them into anything. So anyway, I thought that was kind of neat. That ESP reminded me of that. All right. So how do we conduct research? Okay, we talked about it. We got to have a question. We develop an important question, a research question, because that's based off of a problem that we have. We notice something that isn't quite right or could be improved. So we ask ourselves, hey, self, how do I improve this process? And one of those ways is developing a hypothesis. Now, once we develop the hypothesis, how are we going to get that information? So some of the research principles that your book describes is defining, making sure we have operational definitions. For example, if I said that seniors are overall happier than freshmen, first of all, how does that make you feel? Do you care either way? Okay. Okay. So what does that mean? How do I qualify what happy is? Okay.
That's something to do with it too.
Okay. Define happy for me. What's happy for you?
I don't know. You really can be happy anywhere at any time.
But give me a definition of what happy is. Bryce, what's happy for you?
Just feeling good.
Okay.
Like a healthy sort of.
Okay. Can we measure happiness? No. Well, we can't. If we say go out and find happy people, how are we going to define that? How are you going to qualify it? Happy people might be different for every person in this room. Okay. So when we look at definitions, we need to make sure that we can measure them, and that's what operational definitions comes into play here. So we need to figure out a way to measure happiness, and that might be through a survey. Maybe like an observable trait. Maybe we notice somebody smile 6 times throughout the day. So maybe the more you smile, the happier you are. But we know that that can't be true either, because some people smile because they're nervous too, right? So, so we have to do a better job at figuring out a way to operationally define our values, our variables. Okay. So applied research, that helps with practical problems. Okay. Some things that we might encounter with with research is issues with sampling and behaviors of participants, because again, we're all different. Everybody's a little bit different, so they might respond a little bit differently. Let's see. Okay, I'm actually going to skip that activity. So the first thing we're going to need before we get into research is what in psychology? Okay, yep, but now we're in collection, so we're now collecting data. What do we need? Okay, people. We need people, right? We're studying people. That's what we do in psychology. So we're going to need people to sample for our research. So we got 4 types. We have convenience samples. So that's just basically going out in the street saying, let's say that question, freshman and suicide. I just go downtown Glenville and I see the first 20 people and I bring them in and just ask them about whatever my research question is, whatever my survey is. Okay, is that effective? Right, exactly. Yeah. So I might get some freshmen in there. I might not. Now it's really going to depend on really chance as to whether I get them or not. So the best way that we can that we should try to do is get a representative sample. Okay, so get a certain percentage, a good mix, different cultures, different genders, and kind of split the demographic if that's what we're looking for. Like if we're looking for freshmen, we're going to want males, females, others, right? We're going to want white, black, Asian, whatever. We're going to try and get as big of a collection as possible. Unless the only caveat with that is if we're looking for a specific population, like maybe black males or Asian females or something. If we want to study something very specific, we're going to find people that identify as those things. Okay, so very important, much better to get a representative sample, unless we're just doing kind of a hodgepodge, just collecting as much information as we can. And maybe part of our study is a certain percentage of random people in Glenville are freshmen. That would help answer that study if we did a convenience sample. Okay, random sample. So random sampling is making sure it's not a convenience sample. Random sampling is making sure that everybody that falls within our category, like freshmen, for example, has an equal chance of being represented in that population. Does that make sense? So it's not convenience. It's not going downtown and collecting the first 20 people. But if I send out a flyer saying all freshmen, come to this meeting here and we'll decide whether we'll recruit and decide whether you meet the criteria for our study. That would be okay because anybody that reads that flyer is going to come in here. What would be a setback? Like if I sent out an email, what can you kind of think of what a problem would be if I sent out an email to students asking for them to participate in a study? What?
Depends on what's going on that day.
What am I going to get if I send an email out to everybody? Right, exactly. So if somebody doesn't check their email, then they're not going to be able to participate in it. So that's going to be a limiting factor. You see where I'm kind of going with this? So random sampling is making sure that everybody has an equal chance. So the best way to really recruit is various means. It might be, if you want to get a broad random sample, we might want to consider doing email, phone calls, for maybe posters around, word of mouth, telling other professors to talk to their freshman class. That would be a good way to get a random sample. And then of course, cross-cultural samples, we're gonna want to not really, so, and I'm kind of on the fence with this one here. So cross-cultural samples would be if we want to compare what other cultures or maybe another school or maybe another state is doing and compared to what we're doing. And we can kind of fit that into our background, our literature review. But it's good. It's a good practice to include that, because otherwise, all I'm going to get really is the reports from Glenville, right? And it's only going to apply to Glenville. And there might be some other things going on here that distract us from from supporting our hypothesis. Okay. All right. So quick little quiz for you. Which type of population sample is easy to get but difficult to generalize to the whole population? What do you think, Bryce? Okay. Okay. So easy to get. So if I went downtown and just collected like the first 20 people, what would that be? It would be, want to help them out, Matt? Convenience. So convenience is just, I'm not putting any effort into it. I'm not thinking about what populations I need or what their qualifications are. I'm just going out and collecting anybody. So that's a convenience. You're close. I mean, the difference between convenience and random is a little blurred. Random is a little bit more specific. I'm collecting all the freshmen in Glenville as opposed to just going downtown and collecting everybody. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So what are ways that we can collect data? One of them is through observation. So we can observe a participant in their naturalistic environment. It could be children on a playground. Don't do that, by the way, unless you're getting special permission to do so. Yeah, because sitting at a playground and recording what kids are doing might get somebody's attention there. But maybe talking to wait, we got the prison over here. You know, if you talk to a prisoner while they're incarcerated, you might get a little bit more valid like stress result or anxiety or depression or something like that while they're incarcerated, right? As opposed to when they're out and asking them about how they felt. You know, so there are some benefits to naturalistic observation. Is you get to see the participant what? Right, acting in their natural comfort zone. Now there's some setbacks to that, which is we can't really control the environment, right? So if somebody's out and about and you know, we're studying like their irritability or aggression or something like that, based on traffic, you know, whatever, it might vary depending on the temperature, right? So now we have a variable in there that we can't really control, and that might be adding to our research. That might be adding to our dependent variable. So we got to be very careful with naturalistic observation, because anything could happen. All right, case history, really brief, is just really a full description of an individual. It could include mental health issues, life history, experiences, trauma, you know, something that happened throughout their lives, not in a clinical setting. All right, so surveys. Surveys are probably the best way to get information from somebody, right? Because it's formulated, it's specific questions, it's you know, it's something that we can kind of control the line of questioning. Now the problem with surveys are survey biases. Okay, so survey biases are how we word questions. We got to be very, very cautious on that, because we might induce a response. So your slides has an example here, how they during one of their surveys, they ask these two very different questions. Okay, so one is a little bit more clinical, the one on the right. Sometimes fertility clinics produce extra fertilized eggs, also known as embryos, blah, 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 blah. Okay, very scientific. Okay, and they're asking how many people support stem cell research, right? So it's very scientific, and it's, you know, it's worded in a way that kind of guides people into feeling good about answering, yeah, I support that. What does the other one get to? What does the other one kind of poke at there? Are all of a person's tissues and organs developed? Congress is considering whether to provide federal funding. Live embryos would be destroyed after their first week. You know, so it's very negative. You kind of pick up on the negative tone there. It makes you kind of not feel good about that. So, and what they found is that people that asked that question, they asked that question to, opposed stem cell research. Okay, so that we got to be very cautious in how we present that. All right. So another type of study is a correlation study. So correlation study is there a relationship? So when heat goes up, what do we expect like irritability to do? We're in West Virginia. We should probably know what the heat makes us do here, right? So irritability, what do you think? It goes up, right? So that we can say that there's probably a relationship in there. And as long as we can test that again and again, we can find that, yeah, there is a correlation. Now, within that, we have correlation coefficients. So that's either a +1 or -1. Let me see if I have. All right, so I'll write this up on the board here. So we said irritability. That's not a very good marker. All right, so this is +1, this is 0, and this is -1, okay? So when we say that heat goes up, what do we expect mood to do? Like bad mood? Increase, right? So that's what's known as a positive correlation, because when one goes up, the other one goes up. Does that make sense?
Would it be positive if it went down?
What's that?
Would it still be a positive correlation if it went down?
Yes, it would be. Yep. So if heat went down and mood went down, or irritability went down, we could say that it is also a positive because they're both doing the exact same thing, moving the exact same direction. Now, let's try another one here. Let's say smoking pot and GPA. What do you think? So more pot smoking. What do we expect our GPA to do? Maybe, right? Again, I'm not professing either side of the fence on this one. I don't know if there are studies that show. I mean, maybe excessive pot use might lead to lower GPA. But anyway, that would be, you see how they're moving in different directions. That would be known as a negative correlation. So moving this direction. So why +1 and -1? Because it could be 0.5, like -0.5, okay? Which tells us about 50% of the time when we interviewed somebody that was smoking pot, 50% of the time we noticed a decrease in GPA. Okay, so that's kind of what that means. Does that make sense? So it could be anywhere on the spectrum on either side. But the closer we are to 0, that means that it's just random. There's no correlation. We didn't observe a correlation in any way. So 0.5 is not a very powerful number. It's not anything that we would want to say that we can definitively show that use of pot leads to lower GPA. So anyway, that's any questions on correlation coefficients? Does that make sense? You with me so far? Okay. And of course, we can do that with scatter plots. So scatter plots, as you can see here, they'll show kind of a tendency, central tendency here. So we see a positive correlation here because they're all grouped up. So we're using first test score. I'm not exactly sure what this is showing here. First test score and final exam. So if they scored well in their first test and then their final exam, we can expect them to do well on that one. Absences and final exam scores, I think is what that's showing. So the more absences we see, how are they performing on the final exam? A little less, right? It's not a sharp negative correlation, but again, we see final exam scores go down as absences go up. So that's a negative correlation. Okay, you with me so far? Okay. And then the last 3 digits of social security number. Do you see any correlation there with final exams and social security numbers? Is it moving in any direction, or is it just kind of all over the place? Yeah. So there's really no correlation there. All right. Illusory correlation is when something might be affecting, because we know that that correlation, if there is a relationship with that, then we can say that there is. I'm sorry, I lost my track. Okay, so let me use another example here. If we say during sunny days, people ice cream sales go up. It kind of makes sense, right? So does the sun have anything to do with it? Maybe, but what would be maybe another factor that's causing ice cream sales to go up? It might be heat, right? Because we know when the sun's out, it tends to be a little hotter sometimes. But if we're only tracking sunny days, then there might be that third factor in there that's causing ice cream sales to go up. Because if you have it, if you observe that during the winter, it's probably not going to apply. Right? Not many people are going to be going to get ice cream on sunny days during that time. Okay. All right. So let's talk about, I do want to touch upon independent variables and dependent variables, because this trips people up a lot. And I think, Matt, you mentioned that too, right? So put simply, the dependent variable is always the one that follows the independent variable. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So the dependent, it's right in the word. The dependent depends upon the independent variable. So let's say, trying to think of, okay, let's say alcohol leads to impaired driving. Which one of those would be, if we're doing an experiment, which one of those would be the independent variable? What depends on the other? Right. You get that, Bryce? Does that make sense? So this is our dependent because it depends on the amount of alcohol. So when alcohol goes up, impairment does what? Goes up, okay? And we know that there's a chemical reaction that produces that effect. So for that reason, that's going to be our independent variable. Okay, with me? So let's use another experiment. Let's say the amount of homework that I give students, the higher they report on stress. So I want to experiment with this, and I want to report, maybe one side of the class I give a little bit of homework, and the other side of the class I give a lot of homework. Don't worry, I'm not going to do this to either of you. Okay, but just as an experiment, what is the independent variable in that? Right. And I control that, right? As a researcher, I control the independent variable and expect the dependent variable to follow along with that. Okay. Right. Perfect. Exactly. Let's see if they give an example here. Okay, they don't. All right. Trying to think another example we can use here. If we're looking at irritability as a researcher, I'm looking at irritability and a correlation between irritability and heat within a room. So what can I control in that experiment? Right? What can I control within that experiment? If I wanted to do an experiment on how heat affects irritability within a classroom. I can control the temperature, right? So what does that make that? Very good. Okay. All right. So we're good. We're pretty stable on that. I know we're running up on time here. What did you have any questions? Anything at all?
The quiz will be from chapter 2.
Yeah, let me
Chapter 2, and then create your own hypothetical research.
Yep, exactly. So what you're going to be doing with that is just coming up with your own hypothesis, like we talked about in here. Define a problem. Find a problem. It could be anything that's important to you. It could be family issues. It could be stress levels. Whatever. Be creative. Oh, yeah. That would be the best way. I mean, if you have another idea, that's fine too. But yeah, so do that, and then we'll kind of see what you came up with, and maybe even talk about it on Monday. Okay. All right. If there are no other questions, Bryce, did you have anything?